I don't like my ears. I'm gonna be honest. I never really noticed it.
Because we're in so much HD right now.
There's a lot of focus going on right now. I'm sorry, Nick. I cut you off right before you were about to start with your mojo.
No. Like, that looks good. That's what we wanted for the last 88 episodes.
I've just been like, yeah, it looks good.
3.8 out of 5.
Whoa, no!
That just doesn't work for us.
Sound, speeding, camera, rolling. Scene 89, take 303, mark.
No half stars on take 303. No half stars on take 303. No half stars on take 303.
Welcome to Take 303, powered by 4-Way Media, the podcast with the guy who knows a lot about film.
And his friend.
I'm Nick Molinari.
I'm JP Brooks. We're talking everything film and television, and today we are talking about the film Saturday Night.
But first, in cinematic news.
Cinematic news. Ooh, went for something different today.
Yeah.
Oh, feeling it.
Felt the flow. So, Megalopolis.
Ah, yes. Megaflopolis, yes.
Megaflopolis, make it a hashtag. When I went to go buy the ticket today, the guys behind the counter, they were talking about it. As soon as I walked in, they were like, dude, the last showing was just sold out. And I was like, I don't like talking to people just like out and about. And I looked at him and I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah. He was even surprised too. Megalopolis makes back less than 4% of its budget in its box office debut. For just reference, it would cost over $120 million to make Megalopolis, and that's not counting advertising. So that's
okay. Well, 1% of 120 mil is 1.2 million. So you're saying they made less than 4%? They made less than $5 million?
yeah.
Oh my gosh!
For the genius,
quick math.
the genius that is or was Francis Ford Coppola.
But I really quick story. I was walking in to see another movie with my fiance. I went to see Am I Racist Again. My fiance wanted to see it, and as I'm going to the bathroom before the movie starts, I'm walking into the theater, and there are people going, "What pretentious bullshit was that?" People are yelling, "What a waste of time! What a waste of money!" And I'm like, "You and Eddie were sending me the text." I'm like, "Megalopolis," and they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, was it that bad?" They go, well, yeah, of course." I'm like, "Wait, is it? I heard noise." I'm like, "Is it still happening?" Yeah, we walked out. So yeah, not good.
I actually had the numbers right in front of me. You didn't have to do the math, but it made less than $4 million, like right on the mark.
Yeah, 4% would be 4.8 million. So if it's less than that, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's crazy because like I was telling you about this Indian movie that I saw last week also, and that is what Francis Ford Coppola wished he had made.
Do you think that because this is another work of his that is misunderstood, that this just fuels the narrative?
No, because here's the thing. I had a long talk with Eddie, and we're not going to make this Megalopolis Part 2, but I sat with it, I slept on it, and the more and more I think about Megalopolis, I was like, you know what? I understand it. I get it. And the thing is, I'm sad that I get it. I think it's not only an allegory for the fall of Rome, but it's an allegory for him himself. It's about... Now you haven't seen anything about it. You don't really know. Yeah. All right. So the main character, just walk with me here, is a genius. He knows he's a genius. But everyone has beef with him. And they don't like how he's doing things. But he knows that in his heart, what he's doing is right and will help the future and save the society that he's working for. Does that sound like anybody you know? Or anyone you heard of that directs movies with glasses and a beard? No.
I'm kidding. Okay. I'm kidding.
That was a good one.
Thank you. I'm kidding.
Clearly, you love Saturday Night Live.
I do.
And,
yeah,
you're in it. But yeah, it's definitely an allegory for himself.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola. And then the last bit of cinematic news, because there hasn't been much time between this and the last filming, is that Maggie Smith passed away.
Professor McGonagall from the Harry Potter series, probably what she's most known for, but she's acted in lots of stuff.
Sister Act.
Yeah, so much. She's an iconic face. If you watch TV in the 90s growing up, no way you've not seen her. So
yeah, so rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
And with that being said, we will continue on after the break with Saturday Night.
Everybody has a vision. Everybody has a dream. Something that needs to be captured on the big screen. We at Fort Wayne Media love taking your passion projects and bringing them to life, whether you're a passionate artist or a small business owner. With expert videography and photography, we're going to take what you love to do, what you love to make, and transform it into a cinematic experience. Fort Wayne Media.
And we're back, and we're talking Saturday Night, starring Gabriel LaBelle, Rachel Sennett, Corey Michael Smith, Lamorne Morris, Finn Wolfhard, Nicholas Braun, Andrew Barth Feldman, and Willem Dafoe, and J.K. Simmons.
Saturday Night follows Lorne Michaels, the producer and showrunner for Saturday Night Live. However, it's right before the show ever starts. Its first episode, we follow Lorne Michaels for an hour and a half as it leads up to the great live debut of Saturday Night Live and all of the problems, interesting stories, and crazy characters and everything involved to make that made the show what it was. And that's Saturday Night.
I've heard about this movie for a few months now. Didn't really know anything other than just it's the 90 minutes leading up to the first 90 minutes. And it's directed by Jason Reitman, who's made a lot of great movies like Juno. So I knew this was in good hands, and I really hoped that it was going to be really good. But I stayed clear of like most of the trailers. I saw like bits and pieces in the last couple weeks, the last week in general. I really wish I didn't see that one scene where Chevy Chase trips over himself, because I knew what the punchline was, and it still made me laugh. It's so good. I grew up with Saturday Night Live more in high school and college years, and I really loved it. This was a Saturday Night cast that I didn't get to see really. I've seen like clips, But what about you?
Really grew up with a lot of Saturday Night Live. It was something we watched as a household, even when we were young, 8, 9 years old. And I actually, now that I think about it, Saturday Night Live was probably my first exposure to like sketch comedy and stuff like that. And my dad would talk about like old cast members, and he'd show me stuff. He used to have some on tapes and DVDs. I remember like I had a best of Will Ferrell SNL montage and stuff
because
like
that was more our time, like the 90s with Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler. Like we grew up with those guys.
Yeah, so I had that, but I remember watching a lot of Saturday Night Live, and like re-watching this movie just reminded me how much of an impact Saturday Night Live has had on my life. And even, I crack a lot of jokes. I think it's fair to say a lot of people consider me a funny guy. A lot of it, I mean, heavily inspired from these guys, and I think what you were saying in the car, even about doing the quick ads, like as silly and stupid as they were, like Saturday Night Live, some of them are better, some of them aren't.
You really did make up some of those on the spot, and we were just like spitballing ideas across the room, and it felt like we have to do this live, and we gotta do it live, like Bill O'Reilly,
Yeah, so I love Saturday Night Live, and I think sometimes you forget like stuff that had an impact on you, or you don't realize how much. But man, for me, this was a joy to watch. I think if you're a fan of Saturday Night Live, this is a real treat.
Yeah, I think similar also to like The Fall Guy. If you're someone that works in production also, this is like a visual treat for you, because like just seeing all the behind the scenes stuff, like this is the kind of movie that if I saw it as a kid, it would have made me want to like make movies or make TV shows and stuff like that. Seeing all just the different departments kind of like going through all these hectic situations, and like you and I have been on sets much smaller than this, but we know that it's like Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So seeing all these things happen, it like to me it was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's exactly what would happen.
So good. Yeah, and obviously if you have appreciation for film or television or you'll definitely get a lot more out of it. All of the chaos that happens behind scenes. Behind the set, behind the camera, man. You want to say like you would have been inspired, like dude, I'm 31, and that watching this movie has really brought up some good memories, and like has really motivated me a little bit.
Yeah, there is definitely like the underdog story at the core of it, because it centers around Lorne Michaels,
and it sounds like Lauren, but it's Lorne.
Lauren.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like very inspirational to see him do all this, and one question that was in the back of my head the whole time in the movie was just like not only like how he got to do this in the 90 minutes before it went on, but just how he got to that position in general, because you know, they keep reminding you throughout the movie. They're like, yeah, you know, how did a bunch of 20-year-old somethings just get onto almost primetime TV on NBC? And it was like between them and Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson, again, so for people watching this movie, if you don't know people like Johnny Carson, people like Milton Berle, you're going to be a little bit out of place in terms of understanding the significance of some of these things. And it felt very similar to like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where I remember when I saw that movie, I really loved it. And I was laughing and I'm really enjoying some of the scenes and some of the Easter eggs in there. And then I noticed that the rest of the crowd was kind of dead because they were all around about our age. And a lot of them didn't grow up knowing a lot about the 60s and 70s. So I think also a lot of this is topical, which is why seeing sometimes clips of like 70s Saturday Night Live didn't really hit for me because a lot of it is very topical. It's from that time.
Yeah. And Weekend Update is about the news of that time.
Yeah, so it doesn't really make sense. Like nowadays it's kind of more like punchy and like all about kind of like puns and stuff like that. So you can still kind of follow along even if you don't know what's going on around this time. But the sketches, for the most part, were always on point. And I love those little Easter eggs like the Julia Childs skit. And seeing how all that came together.
My grandfather, I watched a lot of TV with him when he was alive, and he would watch the reruns of the Carson Show. He would watch, you know, TV Land, Bonanza, but like all this old stuff. And I actually seen the Milton, whatever that guy, I've seen his show before, I reckon. Yeah. That's only because I watched it with him. And my dad is a little bit of a TV, like, comedy buff, like TV show comedy. It's weird. Now that you realize, like, yeah, I've been actually shown all this stuff before. I know a lot of the people. I knew a lot of the cast members. I didn't realize how much I knew about SNL until I watched this movie.
Yeah, so what we're getting at basically is that this is really such a love letter to SNL. We looked it up on the way back. It's mostly true, like we would say like 90%. Yeah. But one of the things that really stuck out to me is this cast.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
I skipped through a couple of the names and I felt bad for it just because like I'm looking at the list. I'm like, I don't even know who some of these people are without seeing what they look like. And it's because most of this cast outside of like the 4 or 5 that I named who I knew from other movies, they either play small parts in other movies or I've never seen them before. And I think that was, you said it was the best route to go in.
Yeah, because you're paying an homage to, I like that everyone who they got who's like a bigger actor is playing is playing a big exec, which makes sense, but like an essential cast member, you want them to be Chevy Chase. You don't want it to be Brad Pitt playing Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
You want Chevy to feel like Chevy Chase, and whoever played Chevy Chase, I don't even know the guy's name. Great.
Yeah.
All of these people. And because we don't really know who they are, they did it, and I said very similar to Saturday Night Live, getting really a bunch of, probably at that time, where the internet is definitely not what it is. People are way more unknown. A bunch of 20-year-old unknown comedians, even the idea of being a stand-up comedian as a full-time job. And then getting a bunch of, I'm not calling them nobodies, but a bunch of people who maybe, smaller parts, to play these people who are unknown. Genius. Like, way to respect it.
They did reference, because there is a specific title for it. I don't know if you know this one. But for SNL, the featured kind of comedians that come up like their first year, they're always referred to like it's an official title, like not ready for prime time.
Yeah.
And then as they continue on with the cast, they eventually become, the main cast. So Willem Dafoe says that line. He's like, "You guys aren't ready for prime time." So like little things like that. But yeah, as we're talking about SNL and its legacy, we forget that also like this really changed TV also because we kind of take it for granted, like sketch comedy shows, like things like Key and Peele would not exist right now if it wasn't for SNL.
All that
is the children's version of SNL.
Kenan and Kel, Mad TV. I mean, the list goes on.
And Living Color was after them.
Living Color. Wow. Yeah, a lot of
so like nowadays, like this is commonplace, and like I don't think they have a lot of these kinds of TV shows anymore. I think SNL is the one that like just started them and then also outlived
survived
all those shows. But yeah, we're just so used to this, and then we grew up in an era when we went to high school. We had YouTube, where everyone kind of did their own sketches, and people have moved on past that and go to Vine and now TikTok, and like this is just like Instagram Reels. So like this is like a common thing that we see all the time, but this was the first time that it was on like TV, and it was a big deal.
Because Lorne Michaels in the movie talks about revolutionary, coming out of the underground, and in a way it is. I mean, I can't think of how many comedians or how many people got their start on SNL.
But what I loved about it was honestly its presentation. It's really fast paced. It's very sharp. It didn't need to be 2 hours, and it wasn't. I didn't get a crane shot on this, but I did get a lot of tracking shots.
I knew you were going to talk. That's what they're called, right? Where
Yeah.
they fall. I knew you were going to say something about those kind of shots. I'm glad you said it.
And I love them. It flowed through, and it was like the proper way that I felt like to tell this story, because you're moving from room to room and all around, and you have all these different concurrent stories going on, and it felt very similar to the movie Steve Jobs.
And
right.
what I like too about what you're saying is, in this movie, they don't be like, oh, that's Billy Crystal. They don't spoon feed you. Either you know it or you don't, and they give a little bit of it, but they leave it alone.
Some of the people they really didn't reference by full name until like it was absolutely necessary. Like Garrett Morris, like they kept calling him Garrett, and then eventually he introduced himself to somebody. It was like, oh, my name is Garrett Morris. Like it didn't need to like be like the worst thing my dad always said was with impersonators. He said the worst kind of impersonators are one that are like, oh, hey, I'm Nicolas Cage, and then they do like a Nicolas Cage impersonation. Like that's the opposite of this movie. They fully committed to characters, and I think that's because what we said, they used a lot of actors that weren't name brands, and hopefully that some of them could do more work after this, because they did some phenomenal jobs. Who stuck out in the cast to you most?
Really tough.
For me, I know like some highlights easily. Chevy Chase was like pitch
Very
perfect. I loved Garrett Morris in this.
I think it just has to be mentioned, but Lorne Michaels, he does a really good job. You want to root for him, which I think, like, if you're going to sell this underdog story, you want to root for Michaels, and you end up rooting for him.
Yeah, he's a very sympathetic character.
So that's really good. I really like the wife. I thought she, like, every scene she was in, you felt her presence, but then when she was she didn't linger too long. They did her character really well.
That's a girl from Bottoms.
Yeah, Bottoms.
I really like her in a lot of movies. She's doing some killer work right now.
My favorite guy is the writer, O'Donoghue. Yeah, right?
That's my favorite.
That's your favorite too? Yeah.
When I was thinking of like favorite characters, I'm like, this guy has like a comeback for everything. I mean, nothing stronger than Milton Berle.
Yeah.
But he has some killer lines, and I love the biblical reference that he made.
So good.
So amazing. I didn't know where he was going with that at the beginning, but then once he got to the end, I was like, oh my God. And I really hoped he was just like that in person.
What a ruthless bastard. And I mean that with the greatest compliment.
But it's like, and then I elbowed you, because I was like, he's going through a similar situation that you have been going through in the last couple days. And I was like, this is exactly how you've been handling it without even knowing it.
Yeah, the nice phase is over. I think that you want to talk about, but he's being honest. Maybe he's being cruel, but he's also but his point is getting across. And I think with this movie, if there's one thing I can say about it, I really felt like I was in the 70s. I really felt like this is such an authentic, and I love authenticity. That's probably like, if a movie, even if the plot's pretty bad,
One location,
like this is everything I want in a movie. Unknown, great characters where it's not about, there's no star power here. It's just people acting phenomenally. Authenticity, great storytelling, and great dialogue.
Yeah,
you know when you are like, oof, like, you know, twisting the nipples on the crane shot. This is me. Woo!
Oh, technically they did have a crane. They had
an actual crane.
Yeah, they had a crane,
but not a crane shot.
Yeah, like I noticed from the beginning. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up, but it looked like it was filmed with actual film. Like it did look grainy, and
I love that.
It had the dust in there. So knowing who's behind like the scenes on this, I feel like they probably filmed this with a film camera. Don't quote me here, but it definitely felt like it. It felt like they were definitely invoking the 70s, similar to kind of like watching like Joker. Like obviously that's, you know, different, like Gotham, but it definitely like evoked that time period. Even like the editing, like it wasn't in your face too. Like it was very like you're watching things. It felt similar to The Office in a sense when they were like panning back and forth. That it was like we're like looking in, and it's a voyeuristic kind of situation. Like we're just watching all these things go down.
It's literally you're stepping into this world, and you feel like you're getting a part of it. Nothing feels cookie cutter. Nothing feels hand down. Nothing feels cheesy. Nothing feels over the top. It feels so real. And I think with this movie, what makes it so fantastic is the casting. If there's, we're gonna keep saying it, but I think you said it right on the train. And I didn't even think about it because they're just playing it so well. Like I just really thought it was them.
Yeah.
But the casting is probably the number one thing here.
Yeah. A lot of them sound like that. The original cast. A lot of them look exactly like that.
Wardrobe
on point. But one of the things that I was really worried about going into it was if this movie isn't funny, then it fails. Like it has to be funny. And one of the things immediately, like they're not pulling from the sketches. Like it could have gone the route of something like where they're focusing only on the sketches and like filming them, film the show, you know, that kind of thing. Like it could have. I love the disaster artist, but I didn't want it to be the disaster artist. If you get that,
yeah.
Like I didn't want like extended sequences where they're filming the sketches. Like I liked everything that was happening because they were genuinely funny people behind the set. And I've always heard the stories of like there was crazy amounts of cocaine in the back of Saturday Night Live.
And they address it.
Yeah, and it's right there at the front. And it makes sense because like even when my dad used to tell me those stories, he's like, yeah, they would have like all these drugs just like all back there. And you know, John Belushi eventually had too much, but it makes all of it feel very real when they do this because it's like, yeah, how, and they answer that question like, how do all these unknowns get on TV? And Willem Dafoe's character is always like, you know, testing them like, prove it. And then once they get the chance to prove it, it's like, yeah, these are genuinely funny people.
And I think the beauty of SNL and like what is SNL, I think Lorne Michaels, the movie, gives a great answer. It's just what you would run into in the city on Saturday night. And I think that's the beauty of the show. And I think you need someone like John Mulaney, or what makes comedians really funny is that comedians are sort of, if they get really famous, are these upper echelon of people who don't want to be the upper echelon of people, who want to be as real and authentic and be like the everyman as much as possible. I think Saturday Night Live, what it does great is giving you a realistic, gives you a absurdist like view of the world, a crazy thing that could happen, but you only get it if you're like a regular everyday person.
Yeah, and a lot of it when I got older into college, I saw like SNL is really like very New York. Like obviously it's in the title.
Live from New York.
Yeah, like it's very like in your face, but when I listen to some of the humor, I'm like, a lot of this is New York. And then when you see like, you know, those Boston commercials about like Dunkin' Donuts, I'm like, and you see like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, they're like, yeah, I love Dunkin', you know. I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. Like this is very much New York making fun of the world, essentially.
And then making fun of itself when it does like the subway skits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I'm just gushing about SNL at this point, but I think it's
to bring it back to the movie itself. Favorite scenes.
I mean, a guy whips his dick out. Spoiler alert. That's not a joke. Go watch it.
You should probably add some context to that, but one of my favorite scenes was definitely like the guy telling Chevy Chase how the rest of his life is gonna go. Because I was like, oh man, some of that is real.
The actor who's kind of refusing to like, when it's women construction workers catcalling a guy who's wearing like booty shorts. It's like, that's really funny. I think on a
Garrett Morris's song, hysterical, so timely.
Or how about I think my favorite moment on an emotional level is pulling the guy from the bar to write and like being like, that's not how that's written, which I think is obviously, if you've been in the film world, the struggle of writing something and then finding the person who just gets it and watching someone who doesn't get it. But my favorite scene is watching Lorne Michaels just fall apart, having his breaking moment. because we've all
Yeah.
like if you've been there, you know what it's like. And I think everybody goes through it when you're doing something, especially like, I mean, that's Lorne Michaels' career, right? Like, what is the story if Lorne Michaels fails in that moment? So watch him come to the terms like, it's all kind of falling apart right here. What am I gonna do?
Yeah, and that's really the story of SNL. If you think it's live TV, anything can happen. And then also at the same time, you can't predict how things are going to go. The rehearsals are always going to be different. They're constantly changing different things. One of my favorite characters on SNL was Stefan. And the reason why he was so funny, one, John Mulaney was writing all those nonsense cards. But two, they would change the cards on him during the show.
And he wouldn't know, right?
He wouldn't know.
Bill Hader, right?
Yeah, Bill Hader would be just reading out the cards, and they are different from the ones from rehearsal, and that is the essence of SNL, that like things can change like that, and you have to be ready for it.
There's the famous one of Will Ferrell who walks into like the shop or whatever. Mm-hmm. Everyone's wearing black glasses, and he pulls out the tiniest cell phone on the planet. None of the actors knew that was going to happen, and they all start losing their shit as Will Ferrell goes, "Hold on, let me answer my phone."
Before we head into final thoughts and ratings, I would like to do two things. One, talk about anything that didn't work for you.
No.
Okay. Good talk. Glad we had it. And then my last thing before we head into final thoughts and ratings, just favorite SNL skits, so just very, very quickly.
My favorite SNL skits ever?
Yeah.
My favorite is Will Ferrell as Alex Trebek in Celebrity Jeopardy.
We were quoting that the entire time on Killer in the House.
Let's take a look at the boards.
The rapist. For me,
not what your mother said, Trebek.
For me, like one of the earliest ones that I watched like live was Dick in a Box.
Yeah, the Captain Jack Sparrow, Michael Bolton.
Yeah.
Lonely Island.
Lonely Island really, like, that was, like, they were carrying SNL on its back in that time.
Chris Farley, and he's like a Wisconsin tourist in Japan who gets lost, ends up on a Japanese game show. Michael Myers is the Japanese host. Hysterical.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, if we're going to watch after this, we'll definitely...
Okay, Sweaty Balls.
Sweaty Ball, a classic.
So, final thoughts and ratings.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Sure.
I had a fun time at the movies today. It was definitely what I needed post-Megalopolis. It really captured what I feel would have been the energy back then, would have been the perfect casting. Like, I think this year the Academy Awards is doing a category for casting. And if they are, this movie easily can get that. Because the casting was just pitch perfect. That's like the selling point of this movie. But I think it's genuinely funny, a genuinely good tale about like innovation, and it can be inspiring. We're both writers. Pete just sent me a bunch of scripts to look at, and I read one of them, and he does comedy scripts. So I'm immediately like feeling the juices, because like he wants me to like look at it and like tell him what he thinks and like how we can work with it. I think a lot of this movie is so fun and so engaging. If you grew up with these cast members, you're gonna get a lot more out of it. If you didn't, you can still understand the story. I think it's very concise. It's very fast paced. It is very enjoyable. And yeah, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5.
I think if you're a fan of SNL, that all helps. Knowing some of the history is great. But it's a good movie in its own right, which I love, which you don't need to be a fan to understand, as Nick has said. But one thing I want to say is, one thing that was written in my grade school yearbook is most likely to be. I was actually said most likely to be on SNL. That'll never happen, but I think I've always had a inclination for comedy sketches, acting, performing, being silly, making people laugh. And I think SNL has a very near and dear place to my heart. I think I kind of forgot about that until I started watching. But I think one thing is that it captures the real moment of what is Saturday Night Live, all the struggles that came for it, and you get to laugh along the way, and the movie's authentic, and it's telling a real story, and it's not running on any star power. William Dafoe's in it, J.K. Simmons, but it's not about them. It's about watching this guy.
I didn't even realize that was J.K. Simmons until the credits rolled.
It's about watching a guy struggle to make his dream come true, and other people around him completely lost, they don't get the vision, and him dodging for 80 minutes. What the fuck is this show? And then he finally answers it. It all clicks. It all comes together. Great story, great casting, great actors, great characters, great dialogue. It's why you go to movie theaters. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. No surprise there.
And if you're wondering why there's a Polaroid on my table today, watch the movie.
That being said, this has been another episode of Take 303. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you're following us on Take.303 on Fortway and Fortway_media on Instagram. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. All your help. Leave a comment. Who's your favorite SNL character? What's our question of the week? And poll question of the week is Megalopolis. Bad, terrible, awful. That's what it's all about. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you next time when we watch something else at the movie theaters. Bye-bye.